Hello, fellow teachers. This is Teaching with Power, and today I'm going to give you a great way to teach the parable of the unjust judge in Luke 18 with more impact and relevancy. And if at any time you feel like this video is helping you, then I ask you to please hit the subscribe button, because that's what's going to help the channel to grow and become more visible to other people who might also need help with the sometimes daunting task of teaching the scriptures. And if you like this video, be sure to check out the other videos in this series for the Come Follow Me week of May 13th through the 19th. I usually do about 2 to 3 videos per week. All right, then, let's get to it. For an icebreaker, use this fun little activity to get your listeners thinking about prayer. Trust me, this works really well. Just put up this prayer on the board or on a slide or on a handout, or you could even just pause this video right here and let them look at it on your computer screen and ask, what do you think is wrong with this prayer? And then listen for their responses. But just be sure that you don't let them get away with simply pointing out what's wrong, but be sure to ask them why they think it's wrong to pray that way. And then after a few minutes of discussing their responses, you can transition to the scriptures by saying, Jesus wanted his disciples to understand an important principle about prayer in Luke 18, verse 1. What was it? Now, this parable is a little different than most because it tells you the message of the parable before it's even shared. And it's kind of nice because it's like he's saying, here's exactly what I want you to get from this. And that message is, we ought always to pray and not to faint. And faint in this sense means to give up. Or in other words, we should be persistent in our prayers to our Father in heaven and not give up. Now, that allows us to kind of reverse engineer the interpretation of this parable. So then you're going to ask, as we read verses 2 through 8, look for how the parable teaches that principle. Then you read those verses with them and let them share what they found. And that's just one approach. But you could also ask them, pick out the phrases and words that describe how the widow approaches the judge with her request. And the things that I see in there are, she came unto him, and then you've got the phrase, continual coming, and then later, cry day and night. Therefore, how should we come unto the Lord if we desire a blessing or an answer from him? We should come unto him continually, both day and night, with our prayers. And at that point, you could even share this great quote from Joseph Smith. Come to God, weary him until he blesses you. So it's kind of like he's saying, go ahead, bother God. It's all right. Keep praying, keep asking until you get the answer. And that clearly is the message of the parable. But at first glance, some of your listeners might be confused that God is comparing himself to an unjust judge, somebody who fears not God, nor regardeth man. And we know that's not an accurate description of God. God is just. He does care about man. So you have to look at the message of it this way. Jesus is saying that this judge is the kind of person who doesn't care what God or what anybody else thinks, and yet the persistence of the widow is able to get a man like that, who doesn't care, to act on her behalf. Therefore, if persistence can work on that kind of person, how much more is persistence going to have an effect on God, who does care about his people and will answer those that call on him for help? And he's not going to answer us just to get us off his back either. The judge may have been troubled by the widow's pleas, but God never gets bothered with our prayers. He's going to answer us because he loves us, and he has greater wisdom and perspective than we do. But then that does beg the question, if God cares about us so much and listens to our prayers, why do you think he requires so much persistence and time before he answers us? And there are many correct answers to that question. It could be he's testing our faith. The answer is going to be more meaningful to us if we've worked for it. We may not have the capacity to understand the answer at that particular time. He wants us to put forth some effort ourselves by studying the scriptures or looking for guidance from living prophets. Many different possible answers to that question. And also, I think that in our society, we've just gotten so used to getting everything we want right when we want it. We live in a fast food, fast fix, instant messaging, TV shows where life's problems are solved in half an hour. Just give me a pill to fix my problems. Google in the palm of my hand with the world's answers at the push of a button kind of world. I'm not sure we know how to be patient anymore. Our Heavenly Father just doesn't work like that. He knows that we tend to value things less that come too easily. With him, determination, long-suffering, and enduring to the end produce a sense of value for what we have. And I'm willing to bet you that everything that you truly value in life has required effort, sacrifice, and time to gain. Now, before we get too far into this, there's a big warning that goes with this parable. Please don't mislead your listeners by saying that as long as you're persistent, God will give you exactly what you ask for. I'm telling you right now, that is a false principle. God does not always answer our prayers at the time or in the way that we want him to. And the reasons for why he's not answering can be many. This parable is offering just one of the possible explanations. The reason he hasn't answered could be that maybe we just haven't prayed long enough, and we need to show our desire through our persistence. But that's not always the reason he doesn't answer. It's just a reason. Sometimes our prayers are unanswered because we're asking for the wrong thing. You could pray all day and night for 1,000 years for God to make you rich, and that probably isn't ever going to happen. Persistence doesn't guarantee that eventually we're going to get what we want. What persistence will do is eventually bring us an answer to our prayer. And I'm confident that that is 100% true. God answers all sincere prayers. But the answer may be no, I can't do that for you. I love you too much to grant your request at this time. Just like a parent knows that giving their child whatever they want, whenever they want it, in the long run is not going to be a good thing. So we need to be prepared and open to receiving an answer that we perhaps didn't expect. And once we've received an answer, then our persistence should end, and we should accept God's answer. Some good places to see this in action would be the story of Balaam in the Old Testament, or the story of Joseph Smith, Martin Harris in the 116 pages, where Joseph did get an answer, but kept on persistently asking for a different one. And we all know how that turned out. So the principle is not be persistent and God will give you what you want, but be persistent and God will give you the answer you need. And the answer may be no, or you're asking the wrong question. For example, you may be praying to God to take away a certain challenge or infirmity in your life. But what you really should be praying for is strength to endure that challenge, or help in recognizing the experience and good that are coming from that challenge. You also see this back in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 7, verses 9 through 10, where Jesus says, "Or what man is there of you, whom if his son asks bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks a fish, will he give him a serpent?" The message being, if you pray with faith, God guarantees to give you bread in response to that prayer. He's not going to give you a stone or something useless. If you ask for fish, he's not going to give you a serpent or something that's going to hurt you. Now, it may not be the kind of bread or fish that you wanted. You may have wanted white bread, and he gives you multigrain. Well, be willing to accept the multigrain because it's bread, and it's good. It may just not be the kind of bread that you would have preferred. But we believe in a Heavenly Father that only gives bread, never stones, only fish, never serpents. But I digress a little bit. Back to the parable. One point that I always love to make about the Father is in verse 7, and the phrase that is used to describe what the Father does throughout our persistent prayers. So I ask, according to verse 7, before the Father avenges us or answers us, what does he do in the meantime? And the answer? He bears long with us. I like that. He's not ignoring us. He's not getting frustrated with us. He's bearing with us. He's by our side, giving us encouragement, bearing the burden of the effort and patience required to receive answers to prayer with us for however long it takes. And now to move on to a more personal, applicable level with your listeners, you may want to ask one of the following questions, and I imagine you'll get some very genuine and powerful experiences shared. Have you ever had a time when you felt God was bearing long with you? Or has there ever been a time when God answered you after persistent and continual prayer? Would you be willing to share? Or do you believe this principle is true? Why? And maybe here you could even share a personal experience about a time when you felt that way, because I know that in my life I have felt that, and I hope that you have too. Now, I feel a little strange doing this on YouTube, but maybe I can illustrate this with a personal experience from my life. I know that when I read the Book of Mormon for the very first time, I was 8 years old, and my grandma said that she was going to give me $100 if I did that. And so I did. I read the Book of Mormon, but I knew that when you get to the end, you're supposed to pray about it. So I knelt down, and I asked if it was true, and nothing happened. I didn't feel anything. It didn't feel good. I didn't feel bad. I just didn't seem like there was anything. And so that was a little troubling to me, but I probably did get an answer because I wasn't doing it for the right reason. But a number of years later, when I turned 12, I read the Book of Mormon again on my own and not for a reward. And when I got to the end, I knelt down and I asked if it was true. And that time, nothing happened again. And I didn't really feel like I was getting an answer to my prayer. And so a number of years later, I was in seminary and I read the Book of Mormon again. And that time, I really got into it. And I was really learning a lot about it and applying what I was learning. And when I got to the end of the year, my seminary teacher encouraged all of us to pray to know that it was true. And so this time, I decided to do something a little different. Decided to try to do what Joseph Smith did. And I went out, I hiked into the mountains for a little ways and found a place where I could be all alone. And I knelt down and I prayed with great faith and for a long time. And that time, again, I felt like I didn't get an answer. I didn't feel anything. Now don't get me wrong. I had a testimony of the Book of Mormon already. I knew it was true and that it was good and the things that I was learning from it were helping me. But I wanted to have something a little stronger, a conviction that it was true. And nothing really came of that. I didn't feel like I was getting an answer. And so my mission was approaching, and I really wanted to be able to go out and say that I knew the Book of Mormon was true. I wanted to be able to say that with real strength and power. And so that prayer just became a part of my every night routine of praying. And every night I would ask, please, Heavenly Father, help me to gain a stronger testimony of the Book of Mormon. And it wasn't until one night when I wasn't even expecting it, when I think the Lord said, in a sense, you've knocked on my door long enough. You have been persistent, and now it's time for your answer. And I'm not going to go into great detail, but I'll tell you, I got an answer to my prayer that night. And I felt something that I've never felt before. And that room was just filled with such an amazing spirit of light and truth and warmth and reassurance. Now, why didn't the Lord give me that kind of an experience back when I was 8 or 12 or 16 or all those times I'd prayed? And I think it's because He needed to see my persistence. Because I'll tell you what, I value that answer. And if I'd gotten that answer back when I was 8, I know that I would not have felt the same way about my testimony. I worked for it. And it means so much more to me because of that effort. Well, I hope that wasn't too strange of a thing to do on YouTube, but I thought that it might illustrate the principle in real life. Well, I would conclude with your testimony of God's goodness and patience. I would assure them with your faith that 1, God hears all prayers. 2, if there's an answer that you want, keep knocking on heaven's door until He answers you. 3, if you're persistent in your prayers and won't faint, He will answer you. And 4, be willing to accept the bread that He gives you, even if it's not the bread that you want. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope that helps you to teach this parable with more power and relevancy. And like I said before, if you found this video helpful, as a new YouTuber, I ask you to hit the like and the subscribe buttons, and I also encourage you to share this with as many other people that you feel it could help. And if you have anything to add that you feel would edify me, or if you have any feedback, please leave it in the comments below. All right, my friends, go out and teach with power.